Look, the professors usually come out in a few minutes. Let's give it a bit, and if they don't, I'll just knock," said Caslin. "I suppose," muttered Belder. "I have homework from 2 other classes, and now we have that essay by the end of the week too." "Could have been worse," shrugged Kellogg. "Desala got 2,000 words instead of 1,000. "I did advise her to sit down and pay attention," Deshin grinned, as she bounced on the balls of her feet. "See? That was some top-quality guidance." The girls grinned at that, thinking of Desala as she'd stomped out of the room. "What are we all waiting for, exactly?" asked Sephir. "Well, you really need to see one of the shows that we've been looking at to get the idea, and we can give you some of the files," said Melondi, holding up her omnipad to Sephir and offering a send on the files. "Anyway, one of them has a band that Professor Warwick seemed to like, and we wanted to ask him about it. We're going to try translating some of the other music he gave us, but Caslin and I want to go over to the library first. We figured we could download some of their stuff and check it out too." "Just Lynn," said the twin by the door. "My friends call me Lynn." "And I'm Mara," said her sister. "Mine call me Lark," said Kellogg, as she looked at the others bashfully. Melondi nodded with a shy smile. "Please, call me Mel." "Jax," Jaxmy said, as she offered a fist bump to Melondi. "My sisters call me Pris." Priscilla spoke up and looked at the others. "I heard something about all this from a friend on the council, and I was going to ask for those files too. I'd love to help out." "Belle," nodded Belder, before looking back at Deshin. "What about you?" The thing is, I don't have any sisters." Deshin looked at the other girls, her cheeks colouring as she blushed. "I never really had anyone, you know. Not friends like this." "Desi," smiled Jaxmy. "What about Desi?" Deshin looked at the expectant faces all around her and smiled. "Yeah, please, I'd like that." "Seph," smiled Sephir. She was a tall girl at 6'11", with all the muscle a Marine could hope for, toned like steel cable from all her time on the diving team. Bending down a bit, she nudged Deshin. "Anyway, I'm glad you're back. I was worried about you. A bunch of us were." "So, what now?" asked Prasala, uncertainly. "As your advisor, I recommend lunch." Sephir barked out a hearty laugh that filled the corridor, and the girls grinned. "That does sound pretty good. And did you hear there's a new—" Caslin paused as the door opened, and Professor Pellevon stepped out, holding open the door for Professor Warwick as he strode into the corridor. He surveyed the girls with a look of surprise, while they all moved back to give the pair room. "Ladies, can we help you?" Tom stepped aside, as Mavere pulled the office door closed and locked it behind her. "Is this about the essays?" "Oh, no, sir. Just some research." Melondi stepped forward and nodded at Caslin. That is, you mentioned a group that had some popular music to go with one of the circus shows. I'm in the choir and Lynn is in the orchestra. Anyway, we wondered if you could give us some idea what your favourites are. We're going to listen to them and some of the other stuff too." Tom frowned in thought. "Ah, you mean the Beatles?" "Yes, please." "Well, I have all their music over at the library, but it's only organised by album and song title," he replied, before glancing over at Deshin and rubbing his chin. "We have 3 cargo containers full of material, but after we set aside what was going straight into the exhibit, the rest just sort of got shoved in. You'll be helping me with that, starting tomorrow." Deshin stood just a bit taller and beamed. The professor's frown deepened. Their musical style changed a lot over the years. "I suppose for what you're after, you won't mind whatever you hear, Melondi." Tom paused and looked at Caslin. "But for orchestra, you might want to listen to their middle or later work. I hope you enjoy it. Was that all you ladies wanted?" "I have a question, please." Jaxmy practically bounced forward. Tom couldn't help but smile at their enthusiasm. Despite the unexpected assignment, the girls didn't seem to mind, and it lifted his spirits. Mavere stepped over to his side to join the conversation as he nodded. Of course. What did you want to know? I was hoping... It's just... I'm really very interested in this. Jacksmy reached up and stroked the silk scarf at her label. My co-uncle Jemsy said it's called silk, and it's an organic fibre from Earth. He suggested I look into it, and I really love it. Is there anything about it in the library? The datanet has some things, but it's kind of confusing. So that is silk. I wondered when I saw you wearing it. He leaned in a bit for a look, before nodding towards Mavere. I introduced Professor Pelavon to it when we were in the Japan sector. What did you want to know? Jacksmy looked over to Mavere tentatively. Oh, I don't want this to sound awful, but is it quite expensive? Or very expensive? Is it rare? I mean, I love it, but now I don't know how much of a thank you to send back to him. Some things on the datanet say it's really rare, and some things... Well, I wondered... I was told it can be very, very expensive. Maybe it's better if you let him explain, though. Mavere smiled enigmatically as she looked down at Tom. All the girls looked interested, but Jacksmy looked positively vibrant with excitement. She's right, it can be. That is, just the silk is kind of expensive, depending on the quality. That looks like a very nice scarf too, but when you're talking about something like a kimono or a dress, the price can really go up. It comes in dresses? And... that thing you said? A kimono. It's a full traditional dress robe. It can be made out of cotton or synthetics, but the expensive ones are made out of silk, he said, looking rather pleased with himself. I was able to get one for Professor Pelavon when we visited. Jacksmy's eyes lit up and shot to Mavere, who nodded. She knew it wasn't polite to ask about the cost of things, but she was a Chelkser, and she stood there torn in indecision, quietly dying of curiosity as she looked between Tom and Mavere. It's formal wear? I know silk's not a synthetic, but I hadn't seen anything bigger than my scarves. I didn't know about entire dresses made of it. You can get one made for Shovanti sizes? Mirth broke into a grin. The Minister of Culture presented it to me as a gift. It's just wonderful. Black and purple, and you've never seen anything quite like it. I've been thinking about when I can wear it, but it's just gorgeous. There's nothing else like it on Earth, at least. We even have a phrase, smooth as silk. Anyway, I think the quality is the thing, and the best silk is pretty expensive, nodded Tom. Something like her kimono was sewn by hand, and the sewing only takes a day or two, but the process of weaving the silk, dyeing it and the rest, that can take more than a year. A year? Jacksby blurted in disbelief, before scolding herself on her manners. If I wanted one of those or a dress, how much would that cost? Tom bit his lip, trying to think of dollars to yen to imperial credits, and gave up. When I was stationed there about 20 shil years ago, I was told a normal kimono could be up to $20,000, but a full 12-layer kimono would cost about $100,000. That would have been easily over 2, maybe 3 years' pay. One made by master craftsmen like the ones we met, like Minosuke. I don't know what it would be in credits, but I could never afford it. 3 years? Jacksmy reached up to her scarf and thought she was going to faint. It's probably going to be very rare for a long time, Mavere said thoughtfully. You remember Minister Arata said she's still trying to find a way to market it? Tom, you really should put what we brought on display. You're right. Jacksmy, you can come over with Deshin and have a look at the stored items tomorrow. If you're interested right now, go over to the Asia section of the Humanity exhibit. There are a few pictures you can bring up, and if you visit the file section, look up what we called the Silk Road. It supplies silk to royalty across half the world. Yes, Professor. Thank you, I will. Jacksmy didn't pay attention, as some of the other girls asked questions. Jacksmi brushed her fingertips over her scarf and felt her future calling. It was smooth as silk. Jacksmi had gone over to the Asia exhibit, leaving Melondi to stare at the list of music. I don't understand the order. She glanced over at Caslin. It's just the collection titles, and the pieces are in alphabetical order. Human alphabetical order. How do we know what's early and late work? I'm still trying to figure out how we can tell Mara and I apart, muttered Caslin, as she scrolled down the list. It looks like they created a lot of songs, though. Maybe try the one at the top and the one at the bottom? Melondi scrolled the list back up to the top, while Caslin looked over her shoulder. It says Across the Universe by John Lennon. Across the Universe? I thought you said this was old. He did. Anyway, let's see what it's like. Melondi hit play and closed her eyes. It's some kind of string instrument. There were the vocals, whispered Caslin. Human music always sounds so simple. Wait, that's a choir in the background. Melondi opened her eyes and stared at the title as if it would explain, while the chorus grew. Do you hear the instruments? There's a totally different string section that's ascending in the counter melody. Caslin scrolled the file back. It rises up in the D and A chords, while some other string instrument is playing down from the D to A major. This is brilliant. I heard. The main chord sounds simple, but it's hiding a backdrop underneath the vocalist that's really subtle. The background is as complex as Shulvanti music, but it's all been hidden in the backdrop. Why would they do that? Oh, come on. You're in the choir. We always drop into a censura for a vocalist, but this has the lyrics continuously. It's got to be, so you don't overwhelm the singer, said Caslin. What was he saying, anyway? Melondi was scrolling down to the last song on the list, but paused, fishing out her Omnipad. Oh, I almost forgot, but I downloaded a translator program so I could listen to the other stuff he's given us. Pull up that last song and we can try just listening to the music, and again with the translator. Caslin reached in to scroll down and looked at the title. It says, You've Got to Hide Your Love Away by John Lennon and Paul... I'm not sure how to pronounce that. Melondi set her Omnipad down next to the speaker and leaned over to look at the listing. Wow, Mkikiar... We can ask later if the singer is good. She shook her head and pressed play. It's starting really simple again. Just lyrics and strings. It just added some percussion, Caslin whispered, as she kept her eyes shut in concentration. Shh. The instrument is actually following the vocal instead of leading it, but I want to see what this one has in the background. Melondi went quiet as she watched the file roll towards the end. It was a... Wait, what is that? That has to be some kind of wind instrument. It just came out of nowhere. Let me try it again with the translator this time. Anyway, what did you think, Lynn? She said, scrolling through her pad. Lynn? Melondi looked up from her pad. Caslin had pulled up the video files and was staring, with one hand gripping her chest. Oh my fucking goddess! Mel, they are so cute! Melondi leaned in to look, then stared. The boys were all wearing outfits not that different from the academy uniform, and one of them winked. Oh, wow, she said, fumbling for the Omnipad. We should give this a lot more study. She almost had the translator open when they heard Jacksmi squeal. You don't understand, head administrator. They want to do... It's something human for the student show. Lamanna tried again. Maybe her first explanation hadn't been very coherent, but as the requests from the student council started rolling in, it was getting out of hand. Maybe explaining it was something foreign, but she couldn't really fill in the idea of what the something actually was. Well, if that's what they want to do, for better or worse, it's their show. Ganya sighed and tried to explain. Putting the show together was always intended to teach the girls how to organize big projects. It doesn't have to be good, and I'm rather gratified to hear they aren't just playing it safe again this year. I'm sure it will be alright, as long as you don't let them make it into a huge beach party. They ruined half our stage equipment that year. So, what's the problem, exactly? I don't know how to explain it. Davari wailed in frustration. It's human. Ganya was actually feeling rather pleased with the conversation. While she wasn't actually certain how in public Davari was, the woman was actually approaching her like a teacher instead of an interior agent. It was familiar territory, and she could deal with that. In this case, by delegating. And have you spoken with our human professor about it? What? We have a human professor on the faculty, as you're perfectly aware, Professor Davari. If it's still something that you think the students can't do, that's one thing. Shouldn't do is quite another. Sometimes there's a lesson learned in failures, too. Clearly the word failure got the woman's back up, and Ganya watched expressions chase each other across Davari's face. If you have questions or concerns, why don't you just ask for a bit of his time? If it's something you're incapable of, then let me know. The screen on Ganya's desktop was large enough to watch the other woman's eye start to twitch. Now, I'm very sorry, but I have to take a conference call. Have a nice day, Professor. Ganya reached over and cut the connection, before settling back in her chair. It was good to be the head administrator. Tom paused in the entry to look up at the statue looming in the centre of the foyer. Almost true to life and standing nearly 9 feet tall, it was clearly female, with well-developed breasts, but covered in fine mottled fur over her entire body. The alien wore something like a jumpsuit with a bare midriff, and held some sort of device. Both the clothing and the device looked complex enough to be technological. As for the face, if you mixed a human and a panda, and went heavy on the panda, you might get something like that. Looking around, there were glass cabinets with curiosities on all sides of him, but the hall was otherwise quiet, and he raised his voice. Hello? There was a clatter towards the back rooms, and the sound of movement. Damn, I'll be right there. Tom started heading that direction, past another few rows of cabinets before he saw a figure heading out from the back, and changed direction. Bounding his way was a Shorvanti, a man, and certainly the oldest Shorvanti Tom had yet seen. Reaching Tom, he practically bounced up and down on the balls of his feet, and stared at him with wide eyes. Hi, I'm... Yes. The elderly purple man made a placating gesture with his hands. Just give me a moment. This is a real treat for me, I can tell you. I just want to take you in a moment. First impressions, you know, young fellow. Just remarkable. Tom hid a smile and looked over the Shorvanti, who was clad in a long vest festooned with pockets that bulged at odd angles, and had hair that was, well, not white, but actually the usual black, that had gone almost a silvery grey. The wizened fellow's gaze was roving from Tom's feet to his hair, as he muttered, Remarkable, really, just remarkable. Right, of course, so sorry, Professor Jama Hameres, and very pleased to make your acquaintance at last. He offered a fist and Tom bumped it, blinking in surprise as the man took hold of his arm. Come in. I have some tea going in the back. I just can't tell you how much I've been looking forward to this. Tom let himself be led through the last few rows of cabinets, and back into a professor's office not so very different from the one that he'd been given. Though this one looked, well, lived in didn't quite cover it, he decided. Lived in, used, and maybe needing an excavator when its owner eventually left. Indescribable objects and curiosities covered every available space, in no understandable pattern, with the exception of a working area on the desk and 2 chairs. Just settle down and I'll get the tea. It's from my home, Cambria. The man paused, eyeing Tom. You do like tea, I hope? Yes. Some tea would be nice. Tom settled into one of the chairs, adjusting himself. It was deeply padded and actually seemed to be leather, instead of the cloth chairs in his office. The design was unfamiliar, but it seemed like the sort of thing you could put down in front of a roaring fire on a rainy day, and feel at home in. There was a clatter, and he looked over as the shill walked back with a tray. Right then, this'll put some steel in your spine, he said with a grin, setting the tray down on the table between them, before taking a seat and clasping his hands together. So, do you know what you are, then? Tom reached for the cup sitting nearest and looked at the tea, which was utterly black, steaming, and took a sniff of the deep, almost peaty aroma. Yes, I'm a human, he offered dryly, as he blew on the surface. Bah! Who cares about that? Jarmus said, and Tom looked up in surprise. You, young fellow, are an actual first-generation PCS. A what? An actual living, breathing, first-generation pre-collapse sentient. Jarmus was looking at him intently, and spit a fingertip at him. The first one I've ever met, and an almost perfect example of a convergent evolution, too. Let me tell you what a treat that is. Jacksme looked at the message on her omnipad, and bit her lower lip again. Once she hit send, she was committed. Dear Uncle Jemsy, first I wanted to write and say thank you for the package I received from you last month by courier. It arrived just before the start of school, and I can't tell you the happiness that it has given me. I can't thank you enough. I just love the scarves, and they may be unexpectedly useful. As you suggested, I started looking into everything I could about silk. I've discovered there is almost no awareness of it on Chill, either from the people I talk to or on the datanet. There are mentions, but no one actually knows about it. Fortunately, I think I have a chance to change that in the coming weeks. I paid the 30 credits to register a company name online, and I wanted to please ask if you can send a quantity, see attached. I think I have a chance to get significant exposure right here in the school. We have a show coming up, and most of the nobility with students here will see it. I have spoken to Mother, and taken an advance on my graduation. She is in good health and sends her best, and I've enclosed a transfer of 6,000 credits. I know this is a big advance, but I made a case just like you taught me. She says it's up to me, but gave me that expression. I know I'm asking a lot, but you've all told me that product seeding is important. I have tremendous confidence in this, and hope you will agree. Please extend my love, or formal greetings to everyone there. Jacksme. The background was attractive, but Jacksme looked at the letter for a 5th time, and changed the font to something more flowing. Her only other option might be reaching out to the person the professors mentioned, but if her letter was going to get to Earth, then have any hope of someone sending cargo back in the weeks before the show, she had to send this now. Everything looked right. She looked down and stared even longer at the attachments. Enough silk for scarves for each of the girls in the choir, the girls in the orchestra, a sash for the music teacher leading the orchestra, some of the others. It was so much, but if it was going to work, it had to be visible. And 6,000 credits that had taken some major promises about her future. Goddess, If this didn't work in so many ways, she was doomed. She staked a lot of reputation with her friends that she could actually get silk. This had to work. If it didn't, she could write off getting elected to the council, and she'd pick up a reputation for not delivering instead. If Uncle Jemsy couldn't or wouldn't, she could clear her debt with her mother, but that would be the least of her problems. The worst thing in the galaxy was looking like a failure to her friends. Jacksamy stared at the send button like it was going to bite, but pressed it anyway. So, your people, did you wonder about life in the universe before the Imperium arrived? Jama took a sip of his tea and settled back, looking at Tom thoughtfully. Yes, all the time, Tom said, and considered. Jama was at times excited, crotchety, probing, and thoroughly likeable. Tom decided to speak his mind. We were afraid of something worse when it came to first contact, but we kind of hoped for something better, too. We were kind of wondering where everyone was, the Fermi paradox and all that, and then there you were. Fermi paradox? What's that, then? I guess it sort of boiled down to, where is everybody? As an answer to something we called the Drake equation. That was number of stars in the galaxy, times the percentage we thought had planets, times the percentage of planets that could host life, the percent that actually does, the percent that becomes intelligent, the percent that gets a technological civilization, then a percent of the ones that survive having technology. I know I missed a lot of steps in there, but that's the gist of it. Ah, we call it sentience analysis. Every species that gets past developing astronomy and radio seems to have something like it. I expect we used to, but now it's more a case of filling in the blanks by the Exploration Corps, Jama said with an earthy chuckle. I suppose that's made a considerable difference for the Shovanti over time. I don't understand. Well, young fellow, you understand I'm a cultural archaeologist, yes? You saw that big statue in the foyer, I expect. The one with the fur? Yes. Kind of hard to miss, but I don't... Actually, the display's about twice their life size, but they were unpleasant little bitches who call themselves Ujarans. Still, I suppose you could say they made a fundamental impression on the Imperium in their own way. Their homeworld was only 10 light years from Shill, and as soon as we started developing radio and radio telescopes, we noticed something seriously off. A few decades and some work and resolution later, and we knew there were radio anomalies, and there was an object orbiting around the star that was as radioactive and toxic as a bad father-in-law. Tom tried to process that, while Jama pressed on. Of course, that only whetted people's curiosity. When we developed solar cells, the Empress at the time, Aravala, ordered probes sent. As soon as the first transmissions came back, that's how we learned we weren't alone in the universe. Once we got FTL, it just gave us the chance to poke around and get hard data. Essentially, around the time we were just entering the Iron Age, the Urjar decided to have a full-on nuclear war. Blew themselves straight to the deepest part of the deep. Every last one. That must have had a huge impact on your people. Ah, and right you are there. You find out in one stroke that you aren't alone in the universe, and that space is filled with people too stupid to live. Once we started pressing out into the black, and that was the start of the Imperium's uplift program, which is why I'm so delighted to meet you. Wait, what? My specialty is in pre-collapse cultures, just like yours, and here you are, an actual living, breathing member of a civilization on the verge of global collapse when we arrived. Jama nodded. It's one thing to have digs on worlds like that, but a chance to meet and talk with an actual, living, breathing member of a world right on the brink? I can't tell you how much I'm looking forward to getting to know you. I spent a lifetime picking up data and reconstructing the record from worlds in ruins, but getting a first-hand perspective... Now, wait a minute, Tom frowned. We were having problems, sure, but we were working on them too. Now, Garnia told me you seem like an intelligent young man, and I trust her judgment. I've seen the records on your world. Hole in your ozone, dependence on fossil fuels you weren't really doing very much about, overpopulation that was out of control, directly connected to a shrinking ecosystem, enough nuclear weapons to make the Ujarans blink. Don't tell me you didn't notice, lad. I'd be rather disappointed if all I learn is that you've got a real fucking talent for self-deception. Tom wanted to rise in an indignant defense of humanity. But when it was put like that, what had the doomsday clock been at in 2019? 2 minutes till midnight? It made it difficult to argue when you saw the shoe on the other foot, and it was kicking you with hard evidence. Hell, he'd been in the Air Force and knew almost half of every discretionary dollar was spent on the military. Space and fixing the environment hadn't added up to a penny. Tom scrunched down in his chair and glowered at his tea. Ah, I see you're actually thinking it through. Remarkable. Personally, we had humanity pegged at around a 50% chance of survival, but since you've had the sense to shut up and think, perhaps it was higher than we thought, after all. So you... what? Want to pick my brain about what life was like on Earth before the invasion? Tom watched Jama, as he used the word deliberately, just to gauge his reaction. Maybe humanity had engaged in a lot of self-deceptions, but he'd already seen that the Shilvanti weren't exactly immune. To his credit, Jama didn't bat an eye. Invasion? Well, I suppose that's fair enough. I wouldn't mind discussing that, but yes, I'd like to hear about life on Earth before we arrived. I spent a few years combing over your datanet. Nice to have one that's intact instead of something you have to dig up with a trowel and piece together. If that's all the same to you. Tom took a deep breath and considered the offer. Jama was the only other man he'd actually spoken to since leaving Earth, and if it was a fair playing field. All right. As long as we're both being candid as honest academics about it. My perspectives for yours, then? I wouldn't turn a panel of academics loose on you, lad, but I'm good for some company, and there's always tea. All right, Professor. That sounds good to me. I'd like to hear some more about these other civilizations, too. A deal it is, lad. But call me Jama, then. Sounds good. Call me Tom, he said, before taking another sip of the tea. Right then. So the first thing I'm trying to pick apart is why a notable percentage of humans are still such ungrateful little bitches. Tom choked on his tea.